Welcome to Sober Solutions. We are a weekly recovery podcast not affiliated with any particular 12-step or recovery program. However, you may hear us mention them. My name is Jason, and I'm an alcoholic and addict.
My name is Chris, and I'm an alcoholic and addict.
My name is Ben. I'm an alcoholic and addict.
And welcome back to Sober Solutions Podcast. Tonight is episode 19. And tonight we're going to be talking about long-term recovery. And we have a very special guest with us tonight, Pat McT from N.Y.C. And Pat, it's so good to see you. It's great to have you on the show. And why don't you tell us a little bit about your story?
Okay, I guess the standard way I do it, I guess I'm Pat, I'm an alcoholic, and it's good to be sober. It's a privilege to be here, and thank you for giving me a chance to share my experience, strength, and hope. I drank too much too often and too often too much, and I drank when I wanted to drink, and then I drank when I didn't, when I thought I wanted to drink, and in the end, I drank when I did not want to drink anymore. I'm born and raised in the Hell's Kitchen section of New York City. I'm the 8th of 9 Irish Catholic. 11 of us living in a 3 small bedroom railroad apartment. We were poor, it's needless to say, but I never felt poor. I felt loved and accepted, and I grew up. I fit in, I belonged. I was a joiner, I played sports, Catholic grammar school, Catholic high school. I started drinking somewhere in high school, and it was fairly tame and innocent, a kind of weekend thing. And I dated girls, and I always had this thing about guys. But back in the 50s and 60s, in a place like Hell's Kitchen, you don't go around expressing doubts about your sexuality. It's just a good way to get your ass kicked. So I didn't know anything about sex. Whatever I knew about sex, I learned in the streets. In November 1965, I went in the Marine Corps. I landed in Paris Island boot camp, and the second day there, I found myself in a shower with 40 other Marines, and I had a spiritual awakening. And I said, oh, well, this is probably not a flirtation. So that was kind of new then. In June of 66, I landed in Vietnam. In June of 67, I came home. The drinking took off from June of 67 to June of 81. I always thought it was related to being gay and closeted, and I never saw that a good part of it actually was Vietnam. I was a Marine. I was all the way up north in a place called Dang Ha in Quang Tri province, and I stepped over a lot of bodies and body parts, and I had a desk job, but like I said, I was all the way up north, and I saw a lot of shit go down, and I never dealt with it. But when I came back from Vietnam, when the drinking took off, it allowed me to begin to act out sexually with the men. Like, I couldn't have done it without alcohol, really. And I began to live this double life, and I was in the Hell's Kitchen bars in the early part of the night, and then later on I'd be in Greenwich Village, bathhouses, and all kinds of private sex areas for gay people. And I really grew to friggin' hate myself. I just couldn't stand. I was just living this lie, and I became suicidal. I spent days fantasizing about ways to kill myself. I would go up in the tenement of my building, and I'd be so drunk. I don't know how I didn't fall over sometimes. I'd rock back and forth on my heels, trying to get up enough nerve to roll over onto the roof and off of the roof. And I stood on street corners and waited for buses to come along or trucks. And I was never going to just take pills and go quietly. I was like pissed off. I felt like nobody knew I was alive, but they're going to know when I'm dead, because I'm going to splatter myself all over the avenue. And I don't know why I never did directly attempt it, but I was just living this lie and progressively winding down. About 4.5 years before I got sober, I met a girl in a bar. I would date girls from time to time. We started having sex, and we got pregnant. So I used to lay in bed at night and beg myself for God to just take me out of here. I can't do this shit anymore. And when that happened, I thought, this is it. This is God's will. I'll get married. I'll live as a straight man. Things will change. And I was right. They changed. They got worse. It always got worse. It always got worse because I kept friggin' drinking. That was the part I didn't get. Heather was born in October 79. Sean was born in March of, Heather was born in October 77, and Sean was born in March of 79. And it was just getting worse. The last 2 years of my drinking, I did not want to drink at all. I got nothing out of it. I would get drunk and high, and I would get drunk and pass out and wake up, and get drunk and pass out and wake up. And I was bleeding out of both ends of my body on a regular basis. I was having auditory hallucinations. I was paranoid and terrified. There was no more high or buzz. I was just going from hungover to drunk. I didn't want to drink anymore, and I couldn't stop. About 2 weeks before I came into AA, I was living in Woodside. I had a wife and 2 kids. I had gotten off the subway about 6 o'clock, and it was amazing. I hadn't drank yet that day because I used to drink at work all the time on Wall Street. You could do that back then. And I had the shakes, I had the sweats, I had the runs, and I went in the bar, and I still found myself walking in the bar. I said, I just want to go home. And I still found myself walking in the bar and sitting down and ordering a shot and a beer. I used to curse at myself in the mirror at the bar. You're nuts, you're insane. You don't want to do this anymore. Get up and go home. And when that shot and the beer was done, I ordered another one. I was a maintenance drunk. I drank because I had to have it in my system. June 13th of 81, I don't know what happened, why I did. My brother never said a word to me. He was sober like 4.5 years when I got sober. But in the old days, you used to say you got to let the apple fall from the tree. So he never preached at me, and I saw how happy he was and how his sense of humor had come back, and that was like the seed for me. But he never said a word. I didn't know what AA was like or what it was, what happened when you went there. I called the AA answering service in New York City. They told me somebody from AA was going to call me back. I had 2 bottles of beer left in the refrigerator. I drank those 2 bottles of beer. A guy named Jim from the Woodside group called me back. And from that day until then, till now, I have not had a drink again. And that was the day I stopped doing it alone. I always tell my sponsees, stopping drinking was easy. I did it before I came to AA. I did it a dozen times. One time I stopped drinking twice in one day. I mean, it's not brain surgery. You just stop drinking. But the other end of that tail is what AA is talking about staying sober. That just kept sailing over my head all those years. I didn't know how to stay sober because I didn't have a system to support me. I walked into Woodside Wisdom Group with Alcoholics Anonymous. It was, I walked in off the street. I didn't know what to expect. I sat down at this rectangular table with 12 people. 14 people. It's going around the table. I was the last one to sit down, and it's going around the table, and there was a 12-step meeting, and they're talking about having a spiritual awakening and carrying the message and practicing these principles. I was at a panic attack. The hell are you talking about? I just drink too much, and it got to me, and I used to say there's no soul saved after the first 60 minutes, and meetings would end in the hour, and it was 7 o'clock. And I said, I think I might possibly be an alcoholic, and went back around the table. Everyone in there, they let the meeting run over. They didn't care about that 60-minute thing. They let the meeting run over. Everybody at that table 12-stepped me that day, and I have been sober ever since. I have always gone to meetings. I have almost always had a home group. I had one period of time in the 90s where I took the wife and 3 kids. We went to Disney World for 10 days, and I didn't go to a meeting for 10 days. By the end of the 10 days, I wanted to rip Mickey's heart right out of his chest. I was like clinically insane. My wife said, next time we go on vacation, if you don't have your meeting set up ahead of time, you aren't friggin' going with us because you're a miserable bastard. So I go to meetings. I've always gone to meetings. And I learned about home group. I got sober in June, like I said. And from June to October, I was always Wednesdays and Sundays was a Woodside Wisdom Group. And so one Sunday in October, I decided to stay home and watch the World Series. And I showed up the following Wednesday, and this little woman, Ray, who had gotten sober just before they invented dirt, she came up to me and she said, we missed you on Sunday. Where were you, Pat? I said, I decided to stay home and watch the World Series. She leaned into my face and said, did the fucking World Series get you sober? And then she walked away. And I was like, wow. I mean, these are serious people. I never heard that lady curse before that day. I never heard her curse after that. I think she disapproved of cursing. She just decided to make an exception for my benefit that day. But that was the way the message was delivered. And it was other ways. My brother took me to some of his meetings. There's a guy named Johnny B., the white-haired guy. He talked like a Brillo pad, like that kind of shit. And he's probably younger than I am now. But I sauntered up to him one night before a meeting, and he said to me, "How you doing, kid?" So I said, "Well, to tell you the truth, I've been feeling a little depressed." He said, "I didn't ask you how you felt. I asked you how you were doing." I said, "Well, you crabby old bastard, So then he sat me down and he said, "Look, kid, I'm not telling you your feelings aren't important. They are. I'm not telling you you shouldn't talk about your feelings. You should. What I'm trying to tell you is you need to learn how to step back from your feelings and say, okay, that's how I feel, but how am I actually doing?" And when I did that day, I said, "I'm sober. I'm going to meetings. I got a sponsor. I got a home group. I got a service position. I got a job. I got a roof over my head, clean clothes on my back, food in my stomach, money in my pocket, a family that loves me, a higher power." And I thought, wow, I'm doing great. I feel like crap, but I'm doing great. And there's just a huge lesson in that I still apply when I have a serious mood swing. Sometimes there's this huge disconnect between how I feel about my life and how my life is actually going. And so I have used that over and over again in sobriety and shit. I don't know how many times I've told that story, but it's a hell of a lot of times. So anyway, the point is I was also still living a double life. I was still living a lie. I was still active sexually with men on the side. At 3 years sober, I was in Albany, New York, and I had double my earnings. I had a brand new house outside Albany and 2 kids and two brand new cars. I was a vice president. I had 17 people working for me. I had color TVs and VCRs coming out my ass. I was sponsoring half the city of Albany. I was the GSR for the treasurer for my home group and the treasurer for the Alcathon. And I was knee deep in AA. And I got to my 3rd anniversary with a wife and 2 kids in the audience, and I wanted to drink. I wanted to drink so bad I could taste it. I had everybody singing my praises. I had everything I had chased, and I wanted to drink. And it was because I couldn't live the lie anymore. I had this sponsor, Buckley, for 13, 14 years, and he was very gentle, very slow. He said, "It's time." And so that October, I went on the 12-step retreat. He sent me to, he had a family emergency the last minute. He canceled out. It's called a Matt Talbot retreat. And I show up at this place in Wappinger Falls, New York. I'm from Albany, and you got 100 guys. These are cops and firemen and sanitation workers and construction workers. And I have got this knot in my stomach when I got there. And, the guy comes up to me Friday night and says, "You speaking tonight?" I said, "Do you even know who I am?" He said, "I don't care. Are you speaking or not?" And I said, "I guess I am." So I stand up in this room, and it's like back then you could have candlelight meetings. It's like a candlelight meeting. It's me and all these blue collar guys. It's construction workers and everything. And he's standing up there, Chris McGuire, New York City cop. He said, "If you came in here with a knot in your stomach, get rid of it." And he keeps pounding on the dais. "If you came here with a knot in your stomach, get rid of it." And I don't know why, but he introduced me. And I didn't just talk about being gay. I mean, I just let it out. I talked about orgies and bathhouses and pornography and prostitution. It was all just, I have no idea why it happened. It was just coming out. And, sometimes when you speak at an audience, you can get a feel for whether the audience is with you or not. And there was like nothing coming back. I'm talking and they're looking at me. And I start wondering, when I stop talking, what the hell are they going to do? And I stopped talking. I sat down and they just started applauding and clapping. And I went to that retreat every April and October for the next 20 years. I did a lot of step work there. I brought sponsees up there. I found a whole bunch of men who were really much more open-minded than I wanted to give them credit for. And so many of the fears. I came back from at the end of I did my 4th and 5th step with that same guy who introduced me, Chris McGuire. And The big thing that held me back was the fifth step. I had 6 or 7 things I was going to, to hell with. I just was not going to tell anybody. And I told them all to him, and they almost all revolved some aspect of gay sex. And this is a New York City cop, and I dumped all this stuff, and he looked at me and he says, "That all you got? Big deal," And he actually shared some personal things about his own fifth step before I opened my mouth, which really impressed me. But he said, "I want you to do 2 things when you leave here. I want you to go in the chapel, and I want you to ask as sincerely as possible, ask for forgiveness for anything you think you need forgiveness for from your higher power. And 2, the most important part," he said, "in a blind leap of faith, you need to accept that forgiveness. You can't keep claiming that you believe in God and a loving God and think that God is still punishing you. God wants you to get on with your life. The big book says God wants us to be happy, joyous, and free. We can't be that great a power of example if we're still looking over our shoulders at where we came from." And that was a huge thing for me, forgiveness. That was what was holding me back. I thought I'd done some things I couldn't be forgiven for. I can't explain it now any better than I could then, but I made that leap, and I knew the slate had been wiped clean. The other thing he said to me, he says, "Don't start collecting new crap." You know what I mean? Try to deal with stuff as it comes up. I eventually got fired from a job in Albany. I moved back down to New York City. Kathy and I, when I came out to my wife after that retreat, Kathy and I agreed to stay in the marriage and raise the children, and we did that in Albany. I was not out at the meetings. I was out to my sponsees. Eventually, I got fired. She wanted to stay in Albany. I moved back down to Jersey City. What I didn't tell you is when I told her I was gay, we found out she was pregnant with Michael, who's now 36 and the father of my 3 grandchildren. She gave me, Michael then was like 12. She gave me custody of Michael. I raised Michael alone for a little while, and then Heather moved down, and Heather was a huge positive force for me. What I want to get to is January 2nd, 2014. Heather lost a battle with bipolar disorder. I had to break into her apartment and found her there. She had asphyxiated herself. I don't tell people she committed anything. Heather died of mental illness. I did not retire to Florida because she got sick, and I wasn't going to leave her here. And she was 36 years old, and she was my biggest supporter. When I came out as gay, she was the strongest one of them all. And she was by my side through all of that. But I had to break in the apartment to find her there, and I was devastated. And we were all devastated, and we just staggered and stumbled through it. I still don't know to this day exactly how I got through it, but this program wrapped itself around me. I went to N.Y.C. I got outside help. I joined some groups, the Samaritans. There's a Facebook group for parents who've lost a child to suicide. I went to Al-Anon. I actually saw a medium, and people believe whatever they want, but I actually believe I was in direct contact with my daughter on 3 different occasions shortly after her death. And then the sponsees came out of the woodwork, and I was living in Chelsea, and I got taken to meetings and taken to lunch and breakfast, and it almost got to be too much. Sometimes I'd go to meetings. A lot of people knew Heather. Heather came to me. Heather, Sean, and Michael all saw their father perform in drag at the Ninth Avenue group and other places. They came to my anniversaries at an LGBT group at the end of the 90s, which was unheard of, that you had kids in the audience at an LGBT group. And so a lot of people knew Heather, and they'd come up to me before the meeting or after it, and it was getting to be too emotional. And I started going to meetings 2 minutes late and leaving 2 minutes early because I needed a meeting. And it was just too emotional. But there's been a long, slow recovery. When I started out, I said, "I'm Pat, I'm an alcoholic, it's good to be sober." I started saying that at 10 years sober because it was a breakthrough when I went through the steps the second time. I still had this idea I was being punished for screwing up my drinking. And when I went through the steps, I thought, being sober isn't of itself a good thing as a standalone. But when Heather died, to be honest, I stopped saying it for a while because I just didn't feel it. When Heather died, I just didn't feel it. But I say it now. I've come back and I'm able to laugh again. And I talk about her and I encourage people to talk about her. She's not going to become a family secret. We all agreed on that. And her brothers are the same way. We still talk a lot about Heather. And we laugh how powerful she was and forceful she could be. But this program has carried me through that. And you know what I mean? I don't presume to say I've had the worst of it or the best of it. It's just incredible that I would even think of saying this for the one point I was at. But I am grateful for my life. I'm grateful to be sober. I don't understand. I don't think we're designed to understand some of the shit that goes down in this world, but I accept it. I really believe in people. I believe that God is in people. And that's what Buckley, that's Mozart for 13 years, he used to tell me, stop looking up there for God. He's in all these people all around you. Some people he's a lot harder to find, but they're still there somewhere, buried sometimes, but they're still there. And I was one of them probably for a while. But I have 3 beautiful grandchildren that I'm going to see again in October. I should very quickly found out 2 of my 3 grandchildren. I used to say granddaughters. I say grandchildren now because 2 of them are indicating they're transgender. Sable is 11, and at 5, she was insisting. Sable was insisting I'm a boy, and now the oldest 14, Jet, is going to a school, especially for transgender children. But that's a whole nother thing. My son Michael is sober, coming on 11 years, and this is the one thing I know, he knows, whatever our differences would be, he knows I'm standing right behind him, that those kids are going to have love and support, and and Michael is like me. When it comes to his kids, he gets fucking primal really easily. And no, he's not going to take any shit from anybody. So I'm not saying those kids aren't going to have some tough roads. Of course they are. But they're going to know their family loves them and accepts them precisely and exactly the way they are. And I attribute that to AA too. Anyway, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Awesome, Pat. Thank you so much for sharing that. And, if I did my calculations correctly, you just hit 40 years of sobriety. And I think that you're just scratching the surface with what you told us. And, just seeing you again is just a joy. I started my sober journey 10 years ago. And one thing that I really identified with what you were saying is there's a difference between stopping drinking and getting sober and staying stopped, and that was the struggle that I had. I could not stay stopped. I couldn't get sober. And there was a whole list of reasons why. Some of them were excuses, but the main one is I wasn't ready. I wasn't willing. I wasn't able to take that step to surrender. And I'll actually be coming up on my 1 year in 6 days. Ben's going to be coming up with his 1 year in 7 days. So, it's been a real journey for us. So, one thing that I was listening for, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, is over the last 40 years, I'm sure you've seen a lot of changes within the program. But, how has Alcoholics Anonymous, how has recovery changed from the time that you got sober to today?
Oh, it's enormous. I mean, I used to be very dogmatic myself about what AA is and what isn't. One of the things when I looked at the people that I admire the most, the old timers, the one thing I noticed about them is as they stayed sober, they became less dogmatic, they became gentler, less judgmental, more loving, more accepting. And the Bill W. used to always talk about we either become bleeding deacons or elder statesmen. And I didn't want to be, and I saw people that I thought were like bleeding deacons bewailing and bemoaning the fate of AA. And I didn't want to become one of those. It's a program of attraction. How attractive is it to be so rigid and judgmental? So over time, I've come to see the genius. This is where it comes from. A lot of that stuff that the old timers came from was not out of malice. It was out of fear. They genuinely feared for AA. They thought that AA was a lot more fragile than it actually is. To me, one of the things I appreciate about AA that I don't think a lot of people realize is how vital the fourth tradition is, that every group is autonomous. You can, and it says right in the first paragraph of the four traditions, they're free to do exactly as they please, so long as it doesn't affect other groups or AA as a whole. And that's what's allowed for special interest groups. I mean, the fourth tradition allowed it. It started with men's meetings. You're not supposed to exclude any alcoholics, but you can have a men's meeting. If a woman shows up, you're supposed to let them in. Same thing, you had women's meetings, then you had foreign language meetings, you had dual diagnosis meetings, you had LGBT meetings. All those things come out of the fourth tradition. But even if like you got regular AA meetings where some people, there was a group in Albany, alcohol only group. So you were not allowed to talk about any drug other than alcohol, and they cut you off at the pass. They're not violating the traditions. They are just as, the autonomy that protects the LGBT group and the women's meetings protects that group too. It's a package deal. And, I used to wail and get pissed off about how conservative and rigid some of these AA groups were. And then finally I had like a spiritual awakening and it dawned on me, if those people didn't have those meetings to go to, some of those fuckers would start showing up at my meetings. So I said, more power to you. Start a few more while you're at it, but leave my meetings alone. You know what I mean? So that's where it's come to. But you gotta, when you're in New York at AA, it can fool you. You think it's really like that all over the country. It's not. Clearly, it's not. You can get a very different taste of AA in different places.
Thanks for sharing, not just sharing about your story. Thank you for sharing about Heather and your experience, strength, and hope. And I love sitting back and hearing people with extended period of time, and I just get so much out of it and learn a lot. I especially love how I think you said at your time his name was Chris McGuire. He said, "Is that all you got?" I mean, that was one of my favorite lines. I mean, that just shows that there's no judgment, and you really need it's about acceptance and forgiveness, and like you said, be happy, joyous, and free, right, at the end of the day. I think my question is, if you can go back, so he just said, Jason just mentioned you're 40 years sober. If you can go back to your, let's just say, early recovery, maybe your first year, what would you tell yourself to help out, or what would you tell that person?
I don't know. I'm going to be honest with you. The first year was such a blur, I would tell myself to lighten up, to try to lighten up, to not take myself so seriously. I looked at my life and how screwed up it was, and I said, I got to straighten this all out. And I was swinging away at things and getting so frustrated, and Rule 62 in the fourth tradition is don't take yourself so damn seriously. And I was trying to straighten out everything at once. And it just led to a lot of frustration and anger. And I've second guessed myself on when I should have come out sooner or not. But, it happened when it happened. The kids are fine. I came out to the kids. When I came out to the kids, they were all grown. Sean was the funniest. I came out to him. He was in the Navy when I was doing this. So I didn't want to do it on the phone or in the letter. So I waited till he came home. And he's my oldest son. So I don't know why I was so nervous and shit, but I was stuttering and stammering and with him. And then finally I said, Sean, the truth is I'm gay. And he rolled his eyes to the back of his head and he said, Jesus Christ, Dad, I thought you had cancer. You scared the shit out of me. So he said, Dad, I'm in the Navy. I've heard about these things. You know what I mean? And it's the same thing about the secrets and everything. My brother Jimmy, he knew I was keeping secrets, and he kept telling me, If it has a name, that means somebody else already did it. And Patty, they not only did it, they probably did it better than you and more often than you. So get over yourself, So.
Pat, you are by far my favorite guest. It's been unbelievable to listen to you speak and share your story. One of the things you mentioned early on in your recovery was, the meetings, and obviously the meetings have changed, what they look like for you. But, what was it like for you during COVID with this whole transition to Zoom and now, things are opening back up in hybrid meetings? What does your program look like?
It's merging back now. I'm starting to look at Red Door is opening up. Chelsea mornings. There's a bunch of groups in Manhattan that are starting to open up slowly. So I'm kind of like both ends of them now. We have a really nice outdoor meeting at Chelsea Piers every 7 days a week, and that's weather permitting. But I thank God for Zoom. We're reaching people we never would have reached now. There's people that are shut-ins. There's people who live in remote areas. There's people in nursing homes and hospitals. And, we need to try and maintain some strong Zoom presence and not just shut this whole thing back down, because there's a whole bunch of people we're actually reaching now that we probably weren't reaching before. And we couldn't have done this 10 years ago. So it's an absolute blessing for reaching the sick and suffering.
That's awesome. So, we really focus our podcasts around early recovery and people in their first year or so of sobriety. If there was one piece of advice that you could give the newcomer, what would it be?
There's a guy named Sam T. in Albany. And I came out of this beginners meeting. I ran out of this beginners meeting. This woman pissed me off so much of this meeting, of this shit she was running. She only had 90 days sober. I had 2 years sober. And at the time, the truth was, in hindsight, she was more sober than I was, because I was enraged about some stupid shit she said. So I come out onto Central Avenue in Albany, and I'm pissed. And now I feel I'm going to have to go to a second meeting just to get unscrewed from what happened at the first one. It's that old saying, anyone who tells you there's no such thing as a bad AA meeting isn't going to enough meetings. Because if you were going to enough meetings, you'd never say anything that dumb. I probably ran out of 5 meetings in 40 years. So I'm standing out there and I'm pissed. And here comes Sam T. Sam T is an icon in Albany. Sam T, I doubt he's got a high school education. But Sam T's happy. He's always happy. He's just spiritual and loving and gentle. You could watch in the meetings when Sam T got called on. He had this quiet voice, and you see everybody just kind of hunch forward to listen to Sam T. And so I said, oh, great, I'm off the hook. I can talk to Sam T. I'll tell him how this woman's screwing up AA, and he'll agree with me, and I'll feel better. And I started to unload on him, and he listened to me for a good 30 seconds. And then he did this. He put his hand up. He said, it took me 8 years. I said, it took you 8 years? He said, yeah. I said, it took you 8 years to do what? He said, it took me 8 years to figure out the key. I said, it took you 8 years to figure out the key to what? He said, it took me 8 years to figure out the key to sobriety. I said, Sam? He said, yeah. I said, what's the friggin' key to sobriety? And he leaned in my face with his finger and he said, don't drink. I said, that's it? Don't drink? He said, yeah. You want me to say it again? Don't drink. I said, you mean don't drink and go to meetings, right? He said, don't screw with it. I didn't say that. If you go to meetings, don't drink. If you don't go to meetings, don't drink. If you get a home group, don't drink. If you don't get a home group, don't drink. If you get a sponsor, don't drink. If you don't, I said, I got you, Sam. I'm with you. He said, now, if you're willing to do all that other stuff like home group, sponsorship, meetings, step work, all that, you'll probably find that it's a hell of a lot easier to do. But the absolute key to the whole thing is whether you do or you don't do any of that other stuff, don't drink. And that's what I thought about. That was Sam T. I used to hate people like that. I could just work up such a lather and complicate my goddamn life, and some smart ass comes along with some shit like that.
But how true.
Absolutely true. Oh my God. Don't drink. I think that's excellent advice. Well, Pat, thank you so much for your time tonight. It has been an absolute pleasure. We really appreciate you coming on the show and sharing your life with us.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Yes, have a great night, Pat. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Bye.
But hands down, the best guest we've ever had. I'm sure we only have 19 episodes and like only 7 guests, but whatever.
No, I agree.
I could have listened to him for 40 minutes, an hour. He's an hour-long guy.
And he's one of those guys, yeah, that he could have talked for an hour.
Right.
Jason's definitely texting him, thank you for coming on. Good.
Yeah. Yeah, he's definitely an hour guy. Where like, and you could tell like, yeah, and especially with the dates and like just how he had everything just locked, and then like he's like, all right, I got 5 minutes, and he's like, all right, and like he just had points that he knew he wanted to hit, and they were all like, oh boy.
Yeah, he there's 2 things that I love too, and I even wanted to bring it up, but I really didn't want it. It's one of those guys that you just don't want to talk, you just want to listen.
Yep.
Right? But I love how someone told him, did the effing World Series get you sober?
Yeah.
That was hilarious. But on a deeper level, I really like how he said, how are you doing versus how are you doing? And, he obviously said it better, but I might not be in a great mood, but I am doing well today.
Right.
And, that just goes along with all the programs we are currently working on one day at a time. Is everything okay today, right? Because we all have a roof over our heads currently. We all have a meal to eat. So, we're doing well right now.
Right. He was a guy that there was just point after point after point that I was just like, oh my God, I feel that way. I feel that way. I feel that way. And I was like, I'm not even going to come close to saying, yeah, I know what you mean. Because it literally felt like he would have just patted me on the head and said, good job. Keep going. Like, it was like, I just want to listen to you all day. I don't want to compare myself, because to hear the things that he went through, like to be gay and in the Marines in the 60s, to lose his daughter like that, that is just, that for me is the kind of, it's one of those people that you come across if you're around these rooms, that you hear something and you go, you didn't drink over that? And then when it's just a little piece that I'm going to take with me, and when, things are bad and I'm, thankfully I haven't been to that point yet, where I'm like, oh God, I wish I could just drink over this. But I think it's just hearing stuff like that. It's like, it's just perspective. Like, listen, my problems are not nearly close enough to that. So if somebody can go through an experience like that and not drink, I can certainly deal with this and not drink.
Absolutely. And the thing that kept resonating with me, and, I've heard Pat speak before. He is a friend of mine. But what just kept showing up for me was that this is the program alive. This is what recovery looks like when you are living recovery in every aspect of your life. And it doesn't matter what happens to you. It doesn't matter what feelings you have. If you are living recovery, that's what shows up. And the amount of service that he does, the amount of joy that he has, the amount of knowledge he brings about just life in general. I mean, he's such an amazing person. It's truly an honor to call him a friend. And he was in rare form tonight. He just knows how to bring that brevity to recovery. I think he mentioned that, where he said the old timers, which, I don't know if he identifies as an old timer or not, but with 40 years, I'm going to call him one. And,
I think he qualifies.
I think so too. But, the brevity and the lightness and the fact that this isn't a death sentence. There's so much more that we can do in life now that we're sober, and we can remember the things that we do in life now that we're sober.
Yeah.
And he just lives it.
Yeah, I think he does. I think he subtly, classified himself as an old timer, if you want to say that, when he said that one of the things he admired about the old timers when he came in was that they were gentle and they were more understanding and more compassionate. And hearing him, I can see how he is a gentle, compassionate. Listen, he absolutely, I feel like, would tell you, set you straight. That is New York City recovery right there. They don't, no bullshit, and just so matter of fact, I can't wait to listen back to it. All the comments, just it was just one of my favorite episodes yet. And yeah, I think it's, if we get there, I hope I'm as gentle yet as, I hope I have an impact on somebody like he had on me tonight.
Yeah, I think we just have to reiterate Sam T's comment. Just don't drink.
Just don't drink. Don't drink.
Absolutely. Don't drink. Well, excellent episode. I'm going to make sure that I touch base with him tomorrow and thank him again for coming on. And as always, tonight's episode is dedicated to the still sick and suffering alcoholic and addict, especially the individual who's going to pick up for the first time tonight. Have a good night, guys.
Have a good night.
Have a good night.
We appreciate your liking and subscribing to our podcast. If you liked what you heard today and would like to support our podcast, feel free to Venmo $1 to our virtual basket at Sober Solutions Podcast. We want to hear from you too. If you have a comment, question, topic, or would like to come on the show, find us on Instagram, Facebook, or YouTube at Sober Solutions Podcast. Or you can shoot us an email to sobersolutionspodcast@gmail.com. Find us on Apple Podcast and Spotify. And if you like what you've heard, make sure to subscribe, rate, and review the show.